Got the band cranking out some beautiful music there. It's like Wayne's World, Ronnie. It's the band from the garage. That's what we have to fight with here on the podcast world. Can't go opening up with Jethro Tull or Iron Butterfly or some Skinnerd, which perhaps might get people to propose for marriage live on the show. Rob Browne, Ronnie Sanders here, Doug Dean, Kevin Scarbinsky, executive producer Brendan Martin. Lot to cover today. Football Power Index is out. Auburn's in the Super Regional in baseball, trying to get to Omaha, but tough opponent. The Chanticleers from Coastal Carolina, 21 straight wins. I know Kevin O'Sullivan will be looking for a Christmas card from their athletic department this year. A lot of Gators going to be pulling for Auburn to beat Coastal Carolina. And there is so much happening right now. The football magazines are out. And Ronnie, that means that kind of like, you passing the salt shaker to Elvis, take the top off and it's time to eat. It's time to talk a lot about Auburn. And who better to do it with than you and Doug and Kevin and people watching?
No doubt. It's going to be an interesting offseason. I mean, Auburn is as we were talking before the show, Auburn's generating a lot of buzz, so it should be an interesting year. I was talking to Jay Jacobs the other day, and I said, it's been 50 plus years or longer since Auburn's had 4 consecutive losing seasons. So
late 40s,
longer than that. So
yeah,
can't 80 years.
It's been a while, so things will get better. But Doug and Kevin. Man, y'all are keen observers on y'all pull out stuff every time when we're on here that's like, I didn't even think about that. So start with you, Kevin. The Football Power Index, all these SEC schools, including Auburn, they are trending upward. And you mentioned Chris Lowe has a piece out today. You're on that national level of the elite writers. Let's expand on that and then get Doug's take.
Well, Chris's piece is very interesting. It certainly speaks to a quiet confidence in that program right now, behind the scenes. Chris talked to Hugh Freeze, obviously, a couple of players, and there's definitely some confidence there that this program is about to turn the corner in the right direction after an unprecedented down cycle that the Tigers have found themselves in. I thought it was interesting. And I would like to know, is the FPI, the Football Power Index, is that a proprietary mathematical equation? I'd like to know if we can get a copy of that. My younger son is an aerospace engineering major, and he has this giant whiteboard where he does mathematical equations that are like the Chinese language to me. I'd like to see if he could break that down for me if we could ever get a hold of it. But 13, Auburn at number 13 in the FPI top 25. I'm sorry, number 14, and 13 of the 25 teams from the SEC. So it doesn't get any easier there. But there is I think there's a lot of both inside and outside optimism growing about what Auburn's capable of this year.
Great take. Can y'all hear me, guys?
Oh, yeah.
I haven't always, I bet Ronnie and Rob can relate to this to the extent you can get in the head of our fellow Auburn family members. How did Brian Kelly say it? Family.
So
in the old days, it was desirable to not be talked about, lower expectations, lower the stress on the team and then go out and many of Auburn's great, memorable seasons started exactly that way. I mean, nobody could have seen 93 coming after the debacle of Coach Dye walking away and under pressure. Let's be honest. 2004, they were the part of the problem in not making the 2-team championship game was starting so far behind compared to USC and Oklahoma. But this year, I'm curious if Ronnie and Rob see it the same way. For a lot of reasons, I welcome these preseason well wishes, the pundits being high on Auburn. And my reasoning is Hugh Freeze is trying to brand the program is one of the, top. We're not up there in the lofty air with Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio State and a few others, top 5 year in, year out, early season. But if you can get in the top 15, it does not hurt you in recruiting. It does not hurt you getting visits from kids that can really make a difference. And frankly, I welcome the 14th preseason FPI ranking because I want some pressure on Hugh Freeze. Not so that Freeze will fail from the stress, but so that we are eliminating excuses. We've got some granted they're subjective, they're May and June preseason stuff, but it's going to be hard to say, well, we don't have any talent. I needed 3 or 4 top 5 classes. So put the pressure on us. Let's see what this coaching staff is made of. And I truly believe they've got the roster to have a minimum 8, I think 9 wins in them if they coach well.
I love how, in fact, the only reason, if you look at the games in the last 2 years that Auburn's lost under Freeze, woeful offensive line play, lack of depth, and subpar quarterback play. You've addressed that quarterback situation. And I was talking in the pre-show with Ronnie and Kevin. The number of combined starts, and AU Undercover chronicled this brilliantly. Number of combined starts for the offensive line for Auburn going into this year is 82. Now you bring in Xavier Chaplin from Virginia Tech and Mason Murphy from Southern Cal. Those are 2 tackles. Auburn hadn't seen people like that in a while. Then you start thinking about the recruiting classes combined with the portal. Anything less than 9 or 10 wins this year, and I'm more critical of Auburn than any school out there because I'm an alumnus. I don't think it's a reach to say Auburn wins 10 games because if you look, they've addressed the 2 issues, I think, quarterback and offensive line play, and they're keeping the kids in the program. They're not having mass exodus transfers. The kids love what they see, and I think Hugh Freeze has made a good decision. He's got the NIL collective running that, and I think he's back to coaching. But still, they got to do better with the schemes. But I'm not surprised at all because if you think about Auburn in the last 5 years, losing to South Carolina back to back, they don't play them every year, but they hadn't lost to them prior to that since 1933. They've never lost back to back to Ole Miss ever. They've never lost to Vanderbilt at home in Auburn ever. So all the love in the world for those other schools, but you are beating Auburn like, beating up Uncle Charlie's grandfather in bed for 20 years and Willy Wonka in the Chocolate Factory. Get your licks in now because Auburn is amassing a lot of talent. They've got a lot of money. I know someone that runs one of the collectives. Don't short sell Auburn, and I don't care what the schedule is. You got to play the games, so don't make it bigger than it is. But I think they're a good buy. It's always darkest before dawn. You can't get any uglier than what they've been through the last 5 years.
And look at in the top 15 on this. Thank you, Brendan. FPI is at 9 SEC teams. Can everybody? I know he's kind of brash, but can everybody the pundits get off Sankey's back?
Yeah.
Well, I don't think Greg Sankey supplied any of the data that went into FPI. I know. Look, and we all know the SEC and ESPN are in bed together professionally. We know that that's the home of the SEC now on all the ESPN family of networks. But to suggest that, as again the anti-SEC folks do, that somehow they're rigging this or this is giving the SEC an advantage, I don't see it. Look, if you're Auburn, yeah, it's great to be 14 in the FPI in June, but it's June.
Yeah. And
if you don't go out and beat Baylor in that first game, then all of a sudden that optimism really goes away in a hurry. Well, I'm fascinated, guys, what your thought. What does it say about Jackson Arnold or the perception of Jackson Arnold? Look at the teams, the SEC teams immediately behind Auburn in this FPI. Everybody loves Lenora Sellers from South Carolina. They're a spot below Auburn. John Mateer. Everybody loves John Mateer going to Oklahoma. They're 2 spots behind. Everybody loves DJ Lagway. They're even farther behind.
Yeah.
Is this an indirect vote of confidence, if you will, in Jackson Arnold?
Ronnie.
I think it's a combination of that plus the last 3 years recruiting. I think if you look at Auburn's roster, it's better than it's been in years. And so I think that's I think that's part of it.
I'm
I think
shocked. Well, maybe I hadn't looked at their schedule closely. I thought Florida should be a little higher. I might swap Florida and Ole Miss, for example, or Florida and LSU in these rankings.
I'd swap Florida with Tennessee.
That high? Wow.
Because if you look at the blue chip index, the measure every 4-year cycle of 4- and 5-star players. Last year, Florida was 63% 4 and 5s. They were 9th in the country, the roster. And as bad as things have been recruiting-wise, talent-wise for Auburn, Auburn was 16th last year in the blue chip index. That means you've got more than 50% of your roster with 4- and 5-star players, which means you're eligible technically to win a national championship because no team less than 50% in that matrix has won it all. And that being said, Miami, I'm not buying it. Nothing against Mario Cristobal. I don't buy it. Tennessee, Josh Heupel, you've got a quarterback. Roman Harper said it on the show with Ellis Johnson Monday morning. He turns the ball over. Aguilar or whatever, turns the ball over a lot, even when he's not under pressure. Go back to Jackson Arnold. My God, you talk about getting the shit into the stick. He comes in there to be the quarterback, and all 5 offensive linemen leave, and the top 6 receivers get hurt. And September 21st against Tennessee, he gets benched for a legacy quarterback, Michael Hawkins. They give up 46 sacks last year at Oklahoma. He's got better offensive line, better personnel around him. I look at him like, Palantir today, the stock. It was way down early. You should have bought it when it was way down. You should have bought Auburn when they were way down. I just don't see Auburn getting worse.
To answer, give another angle on Kevin's, as usual, provocative. I'm really enjoying your work lately, Kevin. We've had a revival of Scarbo. He didn't go. Scarbo didn't go anywhere, but he's turned the wick up. Congratulations on your work lately, Kevin.
Thank you.
I think what's happening with Arnold, you could ask the question, should Auburn be a few notches higher in FPI? I don't think so. I think 14 really is kind of sporty because you can't just ignore last season. And if you look at, I guess most people consider the undisputed number one quantitative nerd, especially here in the South, is Bill Connolly. If y'all read, really need your plastic pocket protector when you read his stuff. But his, what can kind of alarm you or sort of be cold water to wake you up about the downside risk for Auburn is the games that most of us would look at those logos on Auburn's schedule and say that I think that's a win, whether it's because it's in Jordan-Hare or you think Auburn just has more talent and can cause problems. A team, for example, Baylor. Auburn has more talent than Baylor, top to bottom, and more depth, and probably a few more elite, explosive playmakers like Coleman and Eric Singleton. I could name others, maybe Simmons. But what I think is going on, to Kevin's point, is a lot of these pundits are from Missouri. Rob, I like to say Missouri, not Missouri.
I do too.
Arnold is going to have to show me their thinking. Now, they're not going to say, I'm going to wait till November to show me. If he goes out and he beats Baylor and he looks good doing it, which won't be easy on a Friday night in Waco. It's probably going to be pretty warm, but it's warm for both teams, right? So I think Arnold, if Auburn can be 4-1 going into the Georgia game in October with a week to prepare for it, an open date, then I think it's a whole different conversation about Jackson Arnold, and you'll see a bandwagon effect because, to Rob's point, he had a lot working against him last year at Oklahoma. And what Hugh is gambling on, whoever you transfer, you're making a gamble. Hugh is gambling that the 5-star Jackson Arnold that had all the metrics coming into college is the real guy in this system. And if Hugh is wrong on that bet, then the seat's going to get warm in a hurry.
Yeah. And I agree with you, Kevin. You make people think when you write. You got a gift. You're not a sunshine pumper. You just make people think, and that's good. I look on here at Texas, Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State. Now they're going really aggressive in the portal. Penn State, I think's high, really high. Oregon, golly, man, they've been recruiting really well. Notre Dame. I think this is, you know what most of this list is? People looking out of the rearview mirror.
Recency bias.
Yeah.
And that's exactly right. And I'm going to zero in on the SEC and the quarterback position. You know, I think it's really hard to say there's a favorite for, you know, preseason SEC quarterback of the year. There are a lot of unproven guys at that position. And who is going to step up? And this is what I'm fascinated to see with Jackson Arnold, especially right out of the box on the road against the defensive head coach who knows how to scheme and put together a plan. How do they handle it when something goes wrong? Because as much as they may have a new feeling inside the building, inside the locker room, on the sideline, there are a lot of players with a lot of bad memories from what happened last year, especially early. How does this team respond when something goes wrong? How does Jackson Arnold respond to an early turnover? Do they revert to bad habits? Do they hang their head? Or do they shake it off, flush it, and move on? That's what I really want to see. I want to see when something initially goes wrong for Auburn, how do they deal with it?
No question. And, you know, expand it beyond the SEC. If you go through that FPI list, there are precious few clearly proven QB1s across the whole top 25. And by the way, I don't count Arch Manning at number 1 ranked Texas, number 1 FPI. I think Manning's going to prove to be outstanding, but he was not perfect a year ago. And you go down the list, talk about the margin of error to the point where on the QB position alone, the safe bet would be this list of top 25 when we get to late November will be wildly jumbled with the rankings. You might see many of these still in the top 25, but I think the average movement up or down of these will be something like 8 or 9. You understand my point there?
I do. Let me ask you guys this, because this has always fascinated me in all of these years and decades following Auburn and getting to know Auburn people. There is it's almost become a cliche at this point that Auburn performs better when it's not expected to perform well. And when it's expected to perform well,
sneak up on people.
Bad things happen.
Yeah.
2003 comes to mind. And a lot of bad things happened after Auburn was, you know, preseason number 1, according to, I think it was the Sporting News at the time. They weren't number 1, I think in the polls, but you can go back to 1984 being number 1,
yeah, and
losing their first 2 games, against 2 very good teams, but still same thing in 2003. Is there something to that, or is that something that, for example, it doesn't affect the players, this staff at all, but is it something that's still in the minds of Auburn people? And is that why it's important to come out of the box strong? Because last year, if you remember, they had what looked like the perfect schedule, 5 home games, 5 very winnable games on paper. And then you go out and lose to Cal, and you lose another home game to Arkansas, and you lose another home game to Oklahoma. And the season's over before you even get to Georgia.
What do you think, Ronnie?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's important that Auburn has a good year, regardless. You know, the preseason stuff. You know, I mean, Auburn people certainly remember, you know, when Auburn's not supposed to be good, end up being pretty good. You know, you look at 2000 or 1993. You look at 2003. You look at 2013. There have been years where Auburn is expected to be bad and ends up being really good. As you point out, Kevin, the years at Auburn is expected to be really good. A lot of times that doesn't happen. So I'm not sure that matters to Freeze and the staff and all those things. I think for them, it's, you know, it's time. I mean, this is year 3, and they've recruited really well, and they spent a lot of money on NIL and a lot of money on facilities and on and on. And so I think and Auburn people are hungry. It's been a while. So,
to Kevin's point, I think there absolutely is. And if it's easy to only say, confident things about Auburn, but if being real and being honest, I absolutely know. I've probably felt it more in the past than now, but there's a segment of Auburn people that just feel like, we just are more comfortable in the underdog role. We like pulling big upsets, many of which have been in Jordan Hare, which has earned. It wasn't given to Auburn. That they've earned this brand. Nick Saban himself said that place is haunted. And he said that last year on ESPN Game Day. But I think part of it too, Kevin, guys, is when the task, and give Alabama credit, give Georgia credit, of starting preseason number 1 or even number 2 and being asked to go wire to wire. Now, you don't have to be undefeated anymore, but you could ill afford more than one loss until the 12-team playoff. I guess we had one or two loss teams that snuck in somehow a couple of times. But so you've got a target on your back every single game. And I think some programs have had more practice. They've hardened themselves and they can deal with they just turn it into being the bully on the block, and they embrace that role. That's something Auburn did, to be fair, in 2004, wire to wire undefeated, 2010, wire to wire undefeated, with the additional burden of the whole world seemingly wanting Cam Newton to become ineligible. So it's a program that has done it before, but Auburn is playing catch up, I would say, with Georgia and Alabama in truly being comfortable in that, high expectation role and trying to go wire to wire to win a national championship.
I think Auburn, though, there's also always been a lot of Auburn fans that woe is me, Horatio Alger. And I think that goes back to Auburn didn't have a college of business till 1967. Took a while for the captains of industry to start being produced by Auburn. College of Engineering's always been there. I think that's been a big part of it. And I think Auburn people are scared to think and dream big. They have Alabama husband or wife or friends. They're like, well, what are Alabama fans going to say? It's like when Auburn debated recognizing all the unrecognized national championships. Who the hell cares what fans of other schools think? But they let that, Gandhi said it best. I will never allow other people to walk through my mind with their dirty feet. And Auburn fans need to embrace that. And I think, Doug, you said something a few weeks ago that just resonates in my head every day. Auburn fans have come to they have to enjoy their championships in dog years, and especially football. Basketball, they're coming frequently now. Baseball, not winning the conference or the tournament, but getting to Omaha is a big deal. I think Auburn, I've never understood it, ever felt that this program is inferior. But I think if you go back to 1966 to 1980, that 14-year period, you had a president at Auburn, God love him, Dr. Harry M. Philpott. He used to say, well, it's fine if Auburn goes 7-4, 6-5, fine football team there at Auburn. That's okay. They didn't build a single building on that campus. Pat and I took over January 2nd, 1981. In 1983, and think about that in terms of today's dollars, there was $250 million worth of construction going on that campus. Athletics are your front porch, and Auburn people need to embrace and love high expectations. And the players, every player that comes to Auburn should say national championship. It's not national championship or bust, but that should always be your goal.
Well, we had Jay Jacobs on the podcast yesterday. It'll actually go up tomorrow. But, he was talking about how much, after the 2010 national championship game, the Final Four, and on, how much applications rose from Auburn, and how many more people knew about Auburn and heard about Auburn. And so it's a big deal. I mean, as you're right, Rob, it's your front porch.
Yeah.
Kind of relate. Go ahead, Rob.
I'm just going to say it's that I was born into an Auburn family. And I never understood. When I got to Auburn, I had 10 pledge brothers in my fraternity at Auburn. that still loved Alabama. By the time we all graduated, every damn one of them was an Auburn man to the core. And Maury Gaston, our friend, said he and David Purcell, those Purcell Farms there in Sylacauga, he used to hang a sign on 280 there in Sylacauga from that bridge in 1970s, honk if you love Auburn. I mean, Auburn people have a blood connection, a temporal blood connection to the school. And Kevin, you know that program so well, man. You sat there and the coaches, you know it. And that's why you can never retire. You can't, because you make people think. But I think that Auburn people in the past, I've asked them, they said, well, we don't want to be like Bama. Bama's got the greatest tradition in all of college football. Better than Notre Dame, in my opinion. But why not recognize all these championships? Like Tommy Tuberville said, it means a lot to those players on those teams. So, why not do it?
Well, look, nothing happens in a vacuum. And I know, Alabama fans like to look down their nose at Auburn fans and say Auburn's goal is to beat Alabama. Alabama's goal is to win a national championship. And maybe there's a kernel of truth in that, but that doesn't tell the whole story. But you cannot look, if you are the coach at Auburn and you're not paying attention to what's happening at Alabama and Georgia, you're not doing your job. But that also is true for Alabama. It's true for Georgia. You think Kirby Smart's not paying attention to what's happening in recruiting at Auburn? You better believe he is. And the same goes for Kalen DeBoer, especially what's happened in this state and Auburn's success in recruiting in the state in the last year in particular. So that's why when I look at this season for Auburn, and I ask myself, and a lot of people want to put numbers on this, and it's really hard to do, what will be a successful season at Auburn? Hugh Freeze has been criticized when he came to the Regions Tradition on the Pro-Am Day and met the media, and he said, look, I know things have to get better. I know we have to go to a bowl game.
Yeah.
And people said, well, is that your only goal is to go to a bowl game? What if it's the Birmingham Bowl, blah, blah, blah. Look, you really think Hugh Freeze's goal is to get to the Birmingham Bowl? I mean, come on, let's get real. Yeah. You want to criticize the guy, criticize him for something substantive, not something silly like that. However, another reason for optimism at Auburn is I would suggest this is the most vulnerable, and vulnerable is a relative term, but it's the most vulnerable Alabama and Georgia have been at the same time in a long time. Yeah. Thoughts on that, guys?
I'm glad you brought that up. It was on my mind, and I was tempted to play it safe and not publicly disclose this, but I'm not feeling too safe. It's almost football season. I reserve the right to alter this opinion after we see a few games that all the teams play, not just Auburn. But my instinct is telling me, for a host of reasons, and Kevin outlined an important one. Kirby Smart himself is, speaking of coaches lowering expectations, Kirby Smart, the way they recruit, he's not recruiting top 20. He's recruiting top 3 classes year in, year out. And he says that fans should I'm paraphrasing, should lower their expectations about offensive and defensive line play, which is how Georgia has made a living when they won championships, right? I mean, I don't, who was the little diminutive quarterback?
Stetson Bennett, the 4th, 5th, and 6th.
Yes, Stetson. Yeah. I'm not criticizing Bennett. He went out and made plays. God bless him. But and then likewise, we know that Alabama's stacked with talent, and it should not shock anyone if DeBoer gets things debugged and the quarterback works out, whether it's Ty Simpson or the young player, and they go on to have for example, a 10-win season. And I think any reasonable fan these days would be ecstatic with a 10-win regular season. But there are flaws at Georgia. There are flaws at Alabama. And you add you deduct points from both of those teams simply because they're playing in Jordan-Hare Stadium. And my take in June, that I reserve the right to modify late summer, early fall. I do not see Auburn losing to both of those arch rivals. I just don't know, Kevin. I just don't know which of the two Auburn is more likely to put it together and win. I can make the case for Georgia because Georgia will not have had time to get everything figured out. It's early October. I could make the case that the Iron Bowl, just the nature of that rivalry, and that Alabama is typically, fans will tell you, they're uncomfortable playing there. They're not scared to play there. They've won their share. But I think Auburn splits that. And if Auburn does, then 9 wins, and maybe Rob's magical 10 wins is not out of reach if they can avoid stepping on their, stumbling in a game that they have every reason based on talent to win. But it's going to be fun to watch.
I would echo that, Doug. That's my kind of view. That's my view in early June, is that a sign of progress, real progress for Auburn this season, is to beat Georgia or Alabama. Either one.
We're not even asking to sweep those.
Well, if you get the first one, you get Georgia, then of course your eyes get bigger and your stomach gets bigger and you want more. But this is a year, again, neither one of those programs has a proven quarterback. Georgia's got questions there. We don't know what Ty Simpson's going to be. We don't know if he'll be the starting quarterback by the time the Iron Bowl rolls around. We have no idea whether he's going to be the guy. And look, Alabama has lost the fear factor with Nick Saban gone. And not only with Nick Saban gone, look, Kalen DeBoer has proven himself as a quality coach. However, they lost to Vanderbilt last year and gave up 40 points. They lost to a bad Oklahoma team and scored 3 points. So they lost in different ways at different times to teams that went 6-6 in the regular season. So they are vulnerable. Again, I say it, and I don't know what year I would go back to, but this is as vulnerable an Alabama team going into the season, it may prove me wrong, as I can remember in a long time.
Yeah, and ironically, Jackson Arnold is not getting credit for the snaps he's taking. He's got more SEC game experience taking snaps than either arch rival this season. So, but it's being discounted heavily because he just didn't go out and have the production that you want to give full credit for it.
All right, I'm going to throw something out, be provocative here. Does this mean anything? In 23, he frees his first year. He inherited in December of 22, arguably, undoubtedly, without any argument, the worst roster in my lifetime Auburn's had. Sorry to those people on that roster, but it was horrible. I mean, so they took Georgia down to the less than a minute with that island of misfit toys. Brock Bowers, the best player in college football, made the biggest play of the year for Georgia. Alabama, Saban's on top of the world. 87, 89% of that team are 4- and 5-star players. And albeit for arguably, you have to be a living brain donor to have only rushed 2 against Jalen Milroe on 4th and 31. Auburn beats both of those teams with that roster. And now you start trending, and I'm looking at this like the stock market, which it's you start looking and going, you look at a program like, Auburn, look at the significant increase in talent. Now, how are teams going to – you going to double-team Cam Coleman? You going to double-team this Singleton guy? And they keep talking. Eventually, every blind hog finds an acorn, as they say in the country. The tight end will catch a pass at Auburn. And I think that guy Frazier's been at Auburn for 11 years. But this is what I'm looking at, and I'm going, guys, you're not talking about a team that's been getting beat by its opponents 42-7. And I just think that, and you're right. I love what you said, Kevin. Kirby Smart absolutely is paying attention to what's going on at Auburn. And whereas Auburn's not getting – what's weird about Auburn is they're not going into Florida and doing like they used to do in recruiting. They're not doing it in Georgia. They're doing it in the state of Alabama. Last year, now, once recruiting got here, those lists were adjusted, but Auburn got arguably 8 or 9 of the top 10 or 11 players in the state last year. This is a seismic, monumental shift in the way Auburn's recruiting. And I'm just saying, I'm not going to predict that Jackson Arnold's going to win the Heisman. Don't forget he was the number 4 quarterback in America coming out of high school and the number 10 overall player out of Denton, Texas. He's got better line play. Damari Austin, Jeremiah Cobb, this guy from UConn.
Darrell Robinson.
Yeah, Darrell Robinson from UConn is is a good one. I just start, looking at and connecting the dots. It's like, you write out on one column the reasons to buy this stock, on the right, the reasons not to. The reasons on the left side are a lot more than not to. And again, name the blowouts that Auburn's lost 49-7 in the last year. The LSU game in 23 was god awful. But where are the blowouts?
New Mexico State.
Yeah, that one.
Not to bring up a bad memory for the Auburn family, but
I know. No, and
Absolutely.
I'm talking about among SEC games.
That game wasn't a fluke either, Kevin.
Yeah,
No,
that
it
was not a
wasn't.
fluke. That's in a special category.
I'll tell you what can't happen at Auburn this year. You
Yeah.
can't lose your third straight game to Diego Pavia.
No.
Yeah.
You absolutely cannot.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I've got a question. So, we talked a little bit about, or Rob mentioned, and I was going to bring this up, the way that Auburn has lost the last two Iron Bowls in Jordan-Hare. Clearly, Alabama gets rattled in Jordan-Hare. I don't think there's any question about that. If Auburn is able to win that game, and Alabama ends up at 8-4, which is possible if you look at the schedule, is this a die kind of shift, or where do you see this going?
I'll take first shot at it.
Go ahead, Doug.
I think it's, and Kevin's going to have a great grounded in Iron Bowl history answer. I know, because I follow the guy and I'm a fan, Kevin. But I think that it will depend. We'll have to see what the context feels like in December. I wish I had a Benjamin for every year. I've said, this is a permanent shift in the balance of power. Case in point, Bama wins the 2009 national championship, and their coach is Nick Saban. There was nothing on the bingo card to say Gene Chizik coming into Auburn at 3-19, Rob, whatever the record was.
5-19, yeah.
5-9. I cheated him out of 2 wins at Iowa State.
Yes.
And yeah, he was DC at Texas when they beat USC for all the Tostitos. But I just think I could have sworn Alabama was poised to go on a three-peat. And you know what? You can give them a sort of qualified three-peat. They went out after 2010 and won 2011 and 2012 national championship. But I think it's difficult with the Iron Bowl to use it as to portend some big shift in the balance of power. Now, what will tell us is if you see the combination of, I'm not predicting this, Alabama always has players, but if you have the combination of Alabama winning, let's say, fewer than 9 games and losing the Iron Bowl and entering the recruiting season and not holding up that top 3 to 5, let's just call it top 5 national recruiting ranking, then that starts to, I can promise you, that starts to worry people in Tuscaloosa, as it would worry any big time program, whether they're in Athens or Austin or even Auburn, if they can get things rolling. Kevin?
Well, I would say this, and not in the sense that, if this doesn't happen, he gets fired, but let Kalen DeBoer not make the playoff, the 12-team playoff for a second straight year. And you talk about the heat rising around him and his seat going into next season. That absolutely would be the case. And I think I'm right about this. Doug, as you were laying out your hypothesis there, I was going through my head. I think this is right. If you start with Paul Bear Bryant, only one, and he's not the answer, only one Alabama coach since 1958 has not lost in his first 2 years to Auburn. You guys want to take a quick guess who that coach is?
Gene
Stallings.
Stallings.
Gene Stallings. He won his first 3,
Yeah.
which was Pat Dye's last 3. And of course, we know what was going on with Pat, personally, his health and the program at that time. But yeah, Gene Stallings won his first 3 Iron Bowls. But every other Alabama coach, starting with Bear Bryant, lost either their first or second or both of their first 2 Iron Bowls. So that's
Kevin,
a hurdle
to
Kalen DeBoer has to overcome.
Do we still? This is tongue in cheek, I promise, kind of. But do we have to count Iron Bowls that were played in, quote, neutral Legion Field? Yes, we do.
Yes.
I guess we do.
Yes, you do. You do.
But they sure felt like road games to, if you ask any Auburn fan. And
But
I've yet to talk to a
dangerous.
Bama fan that said Legion Field ever felt like a road game. You were saying, Kevin?
You do make a good point, Doug, that it is difficult to know at the time that this is as Ronnie suggested, a rivalry changing game for both programs or either program. But that game certainly can change a lot of minds, can open a lot of eyes. And let's be honest, guys, Auburn, and I know this is a woulda, coulda, shoulda kind of thing, they should have won 4 straight Iron Bowls in Jordan-Hare Stadium.
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely.
4th and 31.
They let 2021 get away with TJ Finley playing on one leg. TJ Finley on one leg, and they should have won the game against the Heisman Trophy winner Bryce Young. And then we all know what happened in Gravedigger in 2023.
What would have? It's interesting. What would have been different if Auburn won that? What turned out to be an overtime game in 21.
21.
Yeah. That was Harsin. My bad. And then 23, unforgivable rushing 2 guys, which means rushing no one, and having a spy when the quarterback's not going to try to run 31 yards. It's not happening. And you give away. You just give away. Just choke that 4th and 31. What would be different coming into 2024? I think Auburn probably still goes 5-7 last year, even after beating Alabama in that previous Iron Bowl. I mean, the problems were still there. He was still restocking the coverage. I mean, do you get some residual confidence from having beaten Alabama?
As long as Peyton Thorne's your quarterback.
Yeah.
I mean, and Connor O'Gara, Saturday Down South, is on our show a lot in the mornings. Talked about, I didn't know this until last year. It was a bombshell. He goes, he was benched 4 times at Michigan State. It's kind of like, how did Stephen Leith pass and not be vetted to become the president of Auburn, the $100 million mistake? Who hired Alan Green? Who hired, Brian Harsin? Ban all hot tubs. I'm just saying that for the record. But I'm curious about that neutral site. And I know, but I ask Texas and OU fans, does the Cotton Bowl feel it's slanted one way or the other? Jacksonville, Georgia, Florida. But I know in Birmingham, the people selling you hot dogs and hamburgers and Cokes and parking the cars and everybody there, that was a different, but you know what? It led to December 2nd of 89. But I'll throw this. This is something else. Offensive line play. That's the one area, and Jason Caldwell, AU Undercover, has brilliantly chronicled this like nobody else. He's like Peter Lynch in the Magellan Fund. But there were years after year after year, Auburn would have 11 or 12 offensive linemen. Some of them were converts. Alabama, Georgia, and LSU, 18, 19, and 20. Now, how in the hell are you going to compete? That's like trying to put Mildred on the front of the SI swimsuit issue. It's not going to sell. It's going to repel. And so I look at the offensive line play. Tyler Siskey talked about this Monday night, the Touchdown Club. He said, these kids now, the Joe Moore award-winning #1 offensive line in the country at Washington that played Michigan for the national championship. 2 of those starters went to Ole Miss last year. Neither one of them got on the field. It's because you've got offensive linemen. It takes a minimum 2 years to develop them. And now you've got a little bit of time with some continuity at Auburn. I think Jeremiah Wright at Auburn has been there for 12 years. He's outdone Major Ogilvy. But you've got some guys that have been there that have formed a brotherhood on the offensive line. I trust that guy to the left, to the right. I trust these guys. Trust is what builds relationships, and relationships are what builds trust. And again, I'm more critical of Auburn than any school, but these dots are starting to connect. That's maybe, and I'm not drinking coffee. This is water. Somebody agree with me or disagree?
Well, look, if there's one position, no, you hit it on the head, Rob. If there's one position that has lagged behind quality SEC programs going back 4 or 5, maybe even longer years, it's been the offensive line at Auburn. And we all know it just didn't start with Harsin. It went back to Gus. He failed to emphasize it based on everything that I was told, that the way that Kirby Smart did, the way that Nick Saban did, the way you have to if you want to win a championship or even compete for one in the SEC. You got to be really good up front on both sides of the ball. And while Auburn has not been bad on the defensive front, it's the offensive line that's really held them back. If you're just going to look at one position group.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Kevin's point. People ask me, at the water cooler at more formal gatherings, what is your big worry as far as one personnel group? And it's tempting to say running back, but I just don't worry. I think there's enough talent at running back that Hugh Freeze will find a way to have enough of a running game threat that it won't be Jarquez Hunter. His yak yards we're going to miss. There's a reason the Rams liked him so much. Now, somebody might surprise us and have a banner year, and I think if they do, like Damari Alston or Cobb or possibly Darrell Robinson, who, by the way, his teammate was on a visit last weekend, and Jeffrey Lee at On3 reported, and this is a high school 5-star kid, so discount it heavily. But the kid said, listen, about Darrell Robinson, my former teammate at Franciscan High in Maryland, the DJ Durkin pipeline. He said he has had a turf toe nagging injury for 2 years that slowed him down at UConn. He's well now. So the theory being you might see a different Darrell Robinson in that mix. So I don't worry greatly about the running back by committee personnel group as long as they don't put the ball on the ground. You remember John Heisman, guys, holding a football before his running back group. Gentlemen, if you fumble this football, it would be better that you had died as a small boy. So I worry about offensive line, but not the entire front. That, you got to see Xavier Chaplin show up and be a big improvement on left tackle. And then on the interior, I don't worry about Connor Lew center. He's going to get drafted high. But they got to stay healthy, and they got to become a cohesive group of guys with a bad attitude that like to run block and take it personally that they protect their quarterback.
Yeah, I agree completely, Doug. I think up front is important, and the defensive line is important. I remember, Mike Bellotti told me years ago, he said, he said there's a myth that the SEC, there's speed in the SEC. He said, there's speed on the West Coast too. He said, but, from a receiver standpoint, he said, there are fast guys on the West Coast, just like there are fast guys in the South. He said, the difference is they don't make 300-pound guys that move like cats out here. And talking about at Oregon or on the West Coast. And I think that's a big difference. I think Auburn is better up front.
And
on both sides.
what else we really need to watch, and this is something we can discuss it, we can ask questions, coaches can answer them, but we really won't know until that Friday night against Baylor is, and I think I brought this up before with you guys, Hugh Freeze is an instinct. He has a tendency to fall in love with the throwing game. And particularly in short yardage. I can't tell you how many Auburn games I watched last year, and they were in short yardage or in goal line, and you got Jarquez Hunter in the backfield, and you're putting the ball in the hands of Peyton Thorne to make a decision, an RPO, whatever it might be. And it was just maddening to watch. And again, that's Hugh's MO, though. That's his history. Can he develop? Let's not forget he was out of the game. He's been out of the big time until the last couple of years. So he's still evolving as a head coach. Will he evolve on that point in particular? That's what I want to see.
Well, am I right? I think I'm right,
well,
guys. that Oklahoma linebacker, same guy, Kip somebody, had a pick six against both Alabama and Auburn. God, that's a resume item. Ronnie, you were going to say something?
Yeah.
Yeah, Kevin, you make a great point. I was talking to a well-known former SEC head coach a couple weeks ago, and he said he was talking about Jarquez Hunter and why Freeze didn't give him the ball more. He said, he just can't help himself. He's like, his instinct is to throw the ball, and that's what he wants to do. That's his thing. So, he's either going to throw it to those big receivers and make them make plays, or he's going to have a little bit more discipline and run the ball on 3rd and 1, 4th and 1. Auburn people want you to run the ball when it's short yardage.
We can live with getting stopped right there, right? Right.
Yeah, and I can give you a Jimbo Fisher quote. He said, he's like, on 4th and 1, just run it. There's no reason to all that trick dick shit. So,
look at it. The problem with Freeze is, if you look at his whole career, he's never really been a running game guy. In 14 and 15, he had those 2 big seasons. Other than that, the reason why I think a lot of people are hesitant to put Auburn way up there is he's an 8-4 coach. What did he do at Liberty? I mean, but now, okay, well, he's at Auburn. He's got better resources. That's why I think there is okay, now he's got this. But if they don't change the schemes that they run on offense, nothing's going to change. Y'all are right. Auburn was giddy on Wednesday after they'd beaten Kentucky when they had Vanderbilt come into town. Auburn doesn't get giddy beating Kentucky. The last time Auburn lost to Kentucky in Lexington was 1966. But they did. They followed that up with a win in Kentucky by losing to Vanderbilt. And I know they don't play Auburn every year, but Auburn doesn't lose to Vanderbilt. Remember in Kingpin, you lost to a B-team bowler. He went crazy on, Ishmael Borg. I think that Freeze is at a place that he has resources he's never had before. That's why there's upside.
Well, here's another question. Let me ask this question, Doug, and see what you guys think. He has a weapon now in Jackson Arnold with his legs that he didn't have. Now, Peyton Thorne wasn't a bad runner. He wasn't a statue back there. And remember the Georgia game in Jordan-Hare 2 years ago. Peyton Thorne, I don't know how many yards he ran for. I know he had he broke off one long run during that game and really helped the offense. Jackson Arnold could run it. Go back and look at Jackson Arnold's throwing statistics against Alabama last year. They were not good. But he had a nice game in the run game that opened up some things for Oklahoma. Now, they didn't hang a lot of points on Alabama. It was 24-3. They didn't have to because Alabama scored only 3. But how much does he incorporate Jackson Arnold into the run game with designated calls? How many RPOs does he call? He loves to call those. And can Jackson Arnold take advantage of things that maybe Peyton Thorne didn't? Another thing that I'm anxious to see, I want to fast forward the calendar to that first game against Baylor.
Yeah. Great coaches. That's not original, and I'm probably going to bastardize the actual quote. So help me out, guys. Always backstop me on quote accuracy. But something like the spirit of it is, the good coaches break tendencies for one game, but the really great coaches set up tendencies that opponents will see 3, 4, and 5 games down the schedule. And I've been thinking, and it's not going to happen because we know who Coach Freeze is by now. But I'm telling you, because of the hazards of going into Waco on a Friday night when you haven't debugged everything, I don't care how talented you are, it's very common to see, especially on offense, execution have some challenges in those opening games, especially when you're on the road. But I've been thinking, to me, a brilliant and very unexpected coaching move Freeze could make in that Baylor game is to tell his team privately, not to be talked about in the media, in this opening game, we're going to build the foundation of an effective running game. And you guys get your mind right. We're going to run it about 70% of the time. Now, it will be jet sweeps and Jackson Arnold pulling it down, and we'll mix throws into it. But you mitigate risk doing that. And there is no damn way Dave Aranda is expecting a run-heavy Auburn offense. And if you're successful and you come out of there with 250 yards on the ground and the throw, the passing is going to be there, then all of a sudden you go into the next couple of very winnable games at home, and then you get ready to go on the road to Oklahoma and Texas A&M, and they have to ask themselves, is Freeze going to be run heavy again? And I just think that the next big step for Hugh Freeze will be to listen to his coordinators in the booth who have headset on. What do you see? What do you like here? Remember we had Terry Bowden on? That's how he did it with Tommy Bowden in the booth and Rick Trickett. He would listen to his coordinator and allow them to influence the calls and not get so in love with proving that he's an offensive genius through the air.
And I think he was also trying to keep those 4 freshman receivers last year. And I think he did that subconsciously. It's just me talking. And he didn't commit to the running game. And then when Jarquez went for 278 against Kentucky, it was like, yeah. And but the shock to me is Jeremiah Cobb and Damari Austin are still on that team.
For sure.
They love Auburn. And boy, they're going to pay off. That's what I'm saying. I think he's done a pretty good job of keeping a culture.
But Kevin made a great point. The story of if Auburn comes out of September 4-1, which they'll be talked about nationally if they do.
Yeah.
That doesn't guarantee you anything else the rest of the season, because we can no longer look at the schedule and call a game a W after Vanderbilt swept the state of Alabama.
Yeah, I know. And we got about a minute and a half left. Vanderbilt, state champions of Alabama. The T-shirts are out there in Belmead. You can get them. That
comes crashing down this year, I truly believe.
I mean, Kevin's right. This Diego Pavia, man, it's got to stop. I mean, great. This is a great.
Well, and Pavia's got to be cheering on the Tennessee Vol guard in his lawsuit, which it might challenge why only 4 years of eligibility.
He made
that rule up.
Zakai Ziegler's lawsuit. Yeah,
Ziegler.
The Tennessee point guard.
Yeah.
If he wins that thing, Diego may be a 10-year veteran at Vandy before he's through.
You're gonna have 30-year-old offensive linemen getting NIL because they're not quite good enough for the NFL.
Yeah, there's going to be an age cutoff like there is in youth football. Awesome show, man. Awesome. Love this stuff. Executive producer Brendan Martin, thank you so much. Stay on this channel, man. We got new content coming up all the time. And watch us tonight, Buddy Martin Show on this channel at 9 p.m. Eastern. Thank you.
Always a pleasure, guys.
Always.